Ok. Og så, så kan du kjøre litt intro du, Halina, som vanlig.
Ok, det er veldig rusten, kjenner jeg. Jeg klarer aldri å naile den introen.
Det blir bedre for hver gang. Ja.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Product Club. We've been away for a while, so it's really nice to see you again and hear you again, Hans Martin. How have you been doing?
I've been doing fine, actually. It's been I guess now it's a month since last time around, or maybe even more.
I think 2 months.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Yeah, we've
so
been slacking off.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of months at least for on my end, and that could be worth an entire episode, I guess, in itself. So, but yeah, doing good. How are you, Halina?
I'm doing well. For those of you watching a video, you can see that I'm wearing sequins because I'm trying to feel better. It was a particularly hard Friday morning, so wearing sequins to shine a little bit more. So now I'm doing very well.
Good.
And I'm looking forward to introducing our guest, who I know personally very well, Ninni Høver. Would you like to say hi?
Hi.
Who are you, Ninni? Tell us a little bit about you.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm Ninni. I've been a product manager for 6 years now. And I started off in Schibsted. I was a management trainee at Schibsted, and it was there in the trainee program where I discovered product and how fun product development was. So I had a couple of years as a product manager in the media house part of Schibsted. And then I came to Vipps. Now it's almost 4 years ago.
And you're a veteran in Vipps standards.
Yes. Vipps has changed a lot the last years, going from started as a project within the DNB group, became our own company. We have scaled in every way, number of users, growth metrics, organizational wise, product environment. So when I say that I've been there for 4 years, it's like, oh, you've been there that long, because the majority of employees here actually started 1 or 2 years ago.
So that's interesting, because I mean, how like since Vipps is such an integral part of the Norwegian kind of world or society or whatever we would like to call it, it's just there, right? It feels like it's been there forever, but it's not that old, is it?
No.
It's like
I think we turned 7 years old.
7 years.
Yes, product-wise, but the organization Vipps is 4 or 5 years, I believe, 5 maybe. So when I started, we were, I felt like we were at scale-up stage when I started, in terms of we were maybe around 50 people, which is quite a lot, but still you knew everyone. The product environment, the product team was small. We were three product managers. Maximum, maybe I was hired as number 3. We were organizational wise, we didn't have allmøter or huge forums. We just had informal chats, and all stakeholders, no stakeholder management in terms of you did all the clarification you needed during lunch. So a lot smaller. And now we are, of course, when you scale, you see the need for more structures. Half a year ago, we reorganized or we scaled up the product organization in Vipps. So we established different areas, domains, and created a new level for product managers, or we introduced the group product managers role.
Which you are right now.
Yeah, which is my current position now. So my area is called end user experience. So it covers the end user, the true end user products we have, which is vennebetaling, the P2P payments. It covers the settlement functionality between friends. When you go out and you want to split the bill and make sure that it's done in a not stressful way afterwards. It's in-app communication is the core flows in the app, so it's the end user experience. Yeah.
So, just kind of in terms of size, then, like how many product managers are there really in Schibsted? No, in Schibsted, I'm saying now, because we're all like, this is a disclaimer. We've all been in Schibsted before.
Yes.
That's why kind of Schibsted keeps coming up in this podcast. But in Vipps, how many product people are there?
I think we count 12 now, actually, including the CPO. So divided between 3 product areas now. So we have one area working towards the e-commerce market, or the base product there is the when you use as a user, when you see Vipps in a checkout situation online, and that is one domain. And the second domain is based on the user, when you as a user go to flea market, for example, or go to join your kids at some event, football event or similar, where you go into the app and you type in you either scan a QR code or tap in a 6-digit number and you get paid in the app. So that's one area. And then it's the third, which is the end user experience, which I work in.
Right.
So maybe you can say a little bit about that new level of group product managers. Did you recruit for those roles, or how did that? Did you build that function?
It was an internal recruitment process, but it was an open process. It was a written description of what qualifications we needed, or was seen as needed in that for having that role, and then there was an application process basically that I applied, and we had a process.
And as a group product manager, how is that different from a product manager in Vipps?
First of all, the title is inspired by Marty Kagan's way of organizing an organization. So the group product manager has both operational PM responsibility to keep that contact with the team and contact and ownership to the product. You're part of the building process, and you're part of and you're supposed to know the customer, so being very, very close to the customer still. But it's also combined with coaching role for other PMs. So in Vipps, it's in my area, it consists of 3 product teams. So I have in that area, there's 2 product managers that I coach, and also a third team that I work as a operational PM, day-to-day PM for.
So the reason that we're here today, as you probably have now realized, is to talk about recruitment. And me and Hans Martin don't normally talk that much about our companies, so Vipps and Oda. But in this setting, it works well to talk about recruiting, because both Oda and Vipps have been in a scaling position, and we've had a lot of open positions, and we'll have a lot more. I think Oda is kind of running ahead of us in that you've really recruited in the past few years a lot of product managers. So I think between us, we have a lot of experience in this field. So this episode is meant to be both for people interested in actually applying as a PM for a company, but also how you do recruitment as an internal in those companies. So we hope we can give you some overview of what the market is like for product people, especially in Norway maybe right now, but Hans Martin, you now have experience with recruiting in Finland as well, right? And Germany. So that is the context for this episode before we go deeper into it. But do you want to maybe, Hans Martin, say a little bit about Oda's journey in rapid scaling?
Yeah, I can do that. So for those of you that don't know what Oda is, we're basically a online grocery delivery service. So what we do is basically people buy groceries from us, and we go out there and deliver it to your doorstep. That's the kind of the easy explanation. But in that, we have quite a big product and tech operation because this is something that we've built end to end ourselves. Everything from kind of the store side of the spectrum all the way down to the logistics operations. And so it's really, we tend to talk about Oda as a tech company that happens to do groceries in a sense. And with that, there's also kind of an underlying kind of conception about this being kind of a tech-driven and product-driven company, which means that we have been very adamant on kind of building quite a big kind of tech organization from the get-go. But that really kind of started and kicked off 2 years ago, sort of ish, when we decided that we were going to scale to new markets. And with that, we also we called it kind of a scale up internally, that we had to kind of step up our game, sort of in how we build an organization, how we recruit to it, and how we retain people, how we actually get to the point where we can be in several markets. And so that kind of kicked off. Then I think at the time we were, I can't really remember, we were like 40 people, something like that, in the product and tech operation. Now my area alone, which is shop platform, which is basically kind of the shop side of the spectrum, is close to 80. And that is also kind of mirrored on the logistics side. So we're basically kind of doubled each year since we kind of started there, and we're set to double again. And I guess kind of the interesting challenge to that is that how to say, your strategy for how you recruit during the different phases of that journey is quite interesting. So one is kind of tapping into your friends and family, kind of to and former colleagues to find kind of good candidates, right? But suddenly, kind of, you're in a situation where you're out there in some kind of international market and compete against kind of the other majors out there, which is a very different kind of game to play. So I guess kind of we could it's interesting kind of hear where you are on that spectrum as well in Vipps, since you are also kind of have international growth on the agenda, right? So understanding kind of the processes and your approach to that is that's super interesting to talk about. But I wanted to kind of kick off because being in a process for a PM, that can be a very structured process, and it can be a non-structured process, like given where that company is at any individual time. But I wanted to kind of hear like what's the usual kind of process in Vipps when you have kind of candidates coming in and have applied, and like how does that work in Vipps?
I think we have been recruiting PMs during the last few years, obviously, but not in a massive extent, or not several at the same time. So it hasn't been streamlined, the process in Vipps. But since we're at the moment, we're recruiting 3 new PMs. So we some months or recently we saw the need to to maybe create some common principles and to create the structure around it, which I think is part of scaling an organization to get to make these kind of processes better as we go. So what we've landed on in the product group is to have a basis of a 3-step process, which includes a more informal first step, which is a coffee chat or getting to know the candidate in a more informal way, and that is done by or the candidate meets product managers, preferably two. And then the second step is a case interview, where we try to, of course, create or give a relevant case for the actual task or the actual domain that we're recruiting for. But also, we're very we really believe it needs to be open, so we're really looking forward to see how the candidate think and how they would go about to solve a problem, and also to check if they are problem oriented and not solution oriented. And at this stage, we also decided, we recently had a discussion about it, but we decided that this should also be, these interviews should be conducted by product people to make sure we look for the right methodology and the right process. And then the third step is what we call a cultural interview, which is where we open, where we see more, check the cultural match, and to see if it's a good match with the team we're planning to put the PM in, and to see to try to look for more personal traits and these things.
And in that phase, course, you invite the other team members as well, not just PMs, right?
Yes, good specification. Yes. So at that point, I think, and we also want to we invite tech and UX most often in, and they can also conduct the interview by themselves. The PM doesn't have to be present.
This is interesting because I guess kind of there's this is also kind of something we've discussed a lot. Like you look for a set of kind of fundamentals in that person's profile or a like skill set on the product side, right? But then there's also kind of this. It feels like there's a kind of a push for a kind of a more I don't know, the cultural side of the spectrum though, and culture fit, and kind of it's not necessarily kind of product market fit in a sense, but it's kind of candidate company fit, sort of cultural dimension ish. that is very much on the agenda. And do you feel like that has kind of changed during the last or like with you growing sort of as a company, or has it always been like that for Vipps?
I think Vipps has always been really proud of our culture and identity, and there has been a strong belief from the beginning that what we are inside and what we communicate externally in the product, in marketing, and in all types of communication should match. So I think that's actually we've been conscious about it since the beginning. So I wouldn't say that has increased. I think we have, it's been validated throughout the years. But just to highlight what you said, when looking for a PM, you cannot underestimate, in my opinion, the soft skills, the relational skills of a PM, both towards the team, being interested and also capable of fostering happy teams, motivated teams. So using people skills and being the glue in the team that makes or helps the team enjoy work and work well together is extremely important, in my opinion. But also externally in the organization, and especially in an organization like Oda and Vipps, which is quite big now. The stakeholder management and how you communicate upwards and convince and share your ambitions and make sure they are aligned with the OKRs. And there's so much communication skills involved in the PM role.
Yeah, I
Yes,
really
and we
agree on
talked
that.
about this in a previous episode as well with Leo, right, Hans Martin? So, and is it I think he has. If he had a framework for what he believes is the traits of a good PM, and influencing is a big one, like influencing the people around you in a good way, and so stakeholder management, yes, very important, and not something you can measure in any way, right? It's and it's not something you can train in. Basically, you need to have it or not. Hans Martin, is the process in Vipps similar to the one in Oda?
Yeah, kind of ish. There's naturally kind of deviations from it, and I think we probably have a couple of more steps actually in the pipeline that you guys have. But there's also there's a balance there, right? We're not like you want to understand and learn as much as you can about the candidate, but then again, you don't want to bore them sort of out of the whole thing as well, right? And we have usually 3 kind of structured interviews plus kind of a more informal either coffee chat if needed, or we have kind of screening interviews sort of that our recruiters are doing. Depends a little bit kind of on the role and the people and the actual applicant and if it's an applicant or not, or someone you approach, right, and that you kind of want to sell to. But I think one thing that we have learned also on the way now is one thing. We are also going to vary, like similarly to you, working a lot on kind of the cultural dimension, right, and building an internal or fostering kind of that internal culture and improving that and scaling it. But we've also noticed a lot lately that you also, like, we need to actively sell what Oda is to the candidate as well. So there's like a balance in between us getting to know that candidate and them getting to know us as well. Which especially kind of now that we have started recruiting externally in other markets than Oslo. Like in Oslo, people usually know who we are, right? In Helsinki or in Berlin, people have never heard about us, right? So it's a whole other game to actually get people interested, to keep them kind of retained in the process, which is also kind of something that we're like there's not that many kind of product jobs to choose between in Oslo. Whereas in Berlin, for instance, there's like an abundance of competitors out there for the same talent. So it's a very kind of different game.
So in a way, you need a process kind of roadmap for when you really want to impress candidates and get them in new markets. And that's really different from the process that you need when you're a well-known brand, right?
Yeah, I think so. One thing you mentioned kind of who is part of the different interviews in Vipps, and in our kind of case, we tend to kind of build out a bit broader, like other functions in the company as well, to be part of those interviews, and that's partly kind of due to like a very cross-functional kind of approach to how we build the product teams, but it's also a part of kind of selling what we're actually doing sort of to the candidates, so they get to know more of the actual company as well. So every once in a while we have people from like a commercial department or from the logistics side of the spectrum, or kind of basically someone in a role. Let's say you have an engineering manager in the pro or in as an interviewer. That person could very well be from the logistics side if we talk to a shop candidate. So there's it's trying to kind of showcase also a bit of the width of the company, basically. for them to understand, like, oh shit, this is interesting. I want to be part of this. So,
and that also means though that it's quite a resource heavy process
yeah.
internally as well, because that's another interesting aspect is, as a PM, I mean, you already have a very busy schedule, of course. So recruitment then is added on top. And when you then involve the rest of the company as well, so how do you kind of manage those resources that are involved in the recruiting process, especially when you're at the phase where you're constantly recruiting? So how do either of you kind of fit that in?
Can I just say one thing? I'm a bit allergic to the word resources. I always kind of say people to be kind of just adamant on that, because there's actual people and not resources that you leverage in this.
I actually meant resources, so people and kind of time and like schedules,
right.
And so in that sense it was a bigger one. But yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Of course, we are all people. We are not resources.
I think people internally in Oda is kind of tired of me kind of always correcting that in wherever I can.
It's the same here. I'm always corrected if I call things a project. We're not allowed to say projects. It's an initiative.
Right.
So yeah, you have to work on those the language within your company.
No, but how do you? This is interesting, kind of in a Vipps context. How do you kind of justify the time investment in recruitment from like the likes of product managers and everyone else that is kind of a part of that? Like, how do you talk about that as internally?
It's an interesting question, obviously. I think when we started the recruitment process now, one of the processes or one of the positions is in my domain, so I'm leading the recruitment process here. So what I wanted is to have some kind of consistency, or I wanted to have preferably some of the same people throughout the process, so you get the same foundation for discussing the candidates. So that's an argument in favor of having fewer people involved, but use them through or in more steps of the process. Maybe someone who have met the candidates maybe even twice. But on the other hand, that takes a lot of time from that one person or that these two people, instead of using one from another domain. And so what we ended up was that we have 3 group product managers, and we saw that since it's been a while since we have recruited actively for PMs in Vipps, we have been fairly stable on the product side, and we haven't massively recruited. We decided that it was useful for establishing after this process some common principles on what kind of traits and what kind of competence and what kind of experience are we looking for. Then we decided to take an active part and spend a lot of time on it together. And then, of course, in the third part of the process, like I mentioned, we include engineering managers and UX and so forth.
But as far as I know, Hans Martin, it's a bit different at Oda because you do have dedicated people that work with recruitment, right?
Yeah, so we have a kind of over time now built quite a kind of a big talent acquisition team that basically kind of works with handling kind of the process, sourcing candidates, structuring the agenda basically that we work with candidates on. And I think at some point we had to, since we were recruiting so heavily in, like, we went from being 10 people, right, to being 500 sort of in a very short time. I'm not sure those numbers are correct though, but yeah. But the point was that was kind of massive scaling, and over that time, we really we had to kind of distribute the load of being a part of recruitment processes, because there weren't that many managers in a sense. So you had to kind of, I don't know, even out that load in order for people to be able to do their job. So when you do that, you kind of took a step back and tried to formulate what are kind of these traits that we need to check for in like the individual roles that we have, and try to kind of build somewhat of a how do you say, like a set of questions that are structured in a sense, or more or less structured, that we could distribute to a number of people, so that you're not that necessarily dependent on individuals to go through that entire process.
So in a way, it's like writing a script for user interviews in that sense. Like, and that's something we do a lot in our jobs, I guess, to structure interviews with our users. So it's kind of taking those same principles, I guess, into talent acquisition as well.
Yeah, it is, but it is also kind of, but that's kind of where the similarity stops as well, I think, because it's a questionnaire, but then I at least, and this might be just kind of me though, but I always kind of go off off track in an interview, right, and follow kind of a lead, and try to kind of look for angles that I know that I am interested in knowing more about this candidate, right, and so it is challenging, but it has to it needs to be built up kind of one thing is kind of the structure part, but it's also kind of very much kind of organizational trust in that everybody should have a stake in recruiting and building up the company. So but it is challenging to do, and it requires a lot of coordination to actually get there, and a lot of upfront investment to kind of build that pool of, this is how we do recruitment, sort of, and this is how we kind of share it across the entire company.
And is that sort of a side of things? Is it owned by kind of HR, those kind of functions, or is it a company-wide owned process?
So usually, the talent acquisition team is kind of part of what we call it people, though, which is basically kind of the HR kind of part of the company. So they are part of that, but I have a talent acquisition partner for product management that I deal with, and she is she's awesome, by the way, but she does she does a lot of kind of the practicalities around things, scheduling things, talking to candidates, getting them into a process, but also kind of owning the regular check-ins that we as kind of product leads have with talent acquisition, to talk about the candidates that we have in the process. But and then the kind of individual interviews, they are usually set up with 2 and 2 kind of representatives from our end, but they can be from wherever sort of in the company, either kind of from product, from growth, or from logistics, from like wherever sort of. But it depends a bit kind of who. So usually there would be like, I don't know, 6-7 people involved in one process, but they would be involved for like one interview, or the hiring manager would kind of be in several, in 2 perhaps, or something like that.
So let's get into what are you looking for? Because I think a lot of people are wondering, like, so could I apply as a PM? I don't have the experience, for instance. And let's get more into the backgrounds. Who is applying first? Like, what kind of candidates are applying? What kind of candidates are you looking for in your networks? I think people would be interested to hear your thoughts around that.
Go ahead, Ninni. What are you looking for?
I think you can, or good PMs comes from a variety of backgrounds. There's no standard PM CV, in my opinion, or a recipe on how to become the perfect PM. I think you can come from tech, and we see from the applicants now that we have someone coming from tech who wants to test out the more strategic perspective and have a more holistic role. And some of them are motivated by getting closer, or spend more time on the user insights, and getting to know the customer better. And some wants to test out the more extrovert role and be a more deal with stakeholders and so forth. So surprisingly, in my process now, surprisingly many people from tech. And we have someone from UX or someone with design background who obviously love the discovery phase, but according to the motivational letters at least, and the ones I've talked to, they are intrigued by or want to see things get realized or see them get built, and want to test out the team leadership part of the PM role. And of course, you have the ones with the business background who want to learn, get closer to tech. I see that, and also some experience from Schibsted, where it's not all organizations that have tech and business are at least come that far in terms of cross-functional team. And I see from my network and I often hear that there's still these bestillingsorganisasjoner where people create a spec and then hand it over to this other department that actually do the building part. Which is, I think it's a big contrast to Vipps, and I hear Oda as well, that we've come really far in creating good product teams that has all the necessary competence in it. And then lastly, I think in this process, I've been surprised by the number of consultants or current consultants that wants to come into a larger company and get ownership over a product and take it from idea to launch, and learn and then iterate and not just leave the project.
And do you also see experienced PMs? Is there such a thing as like a pool of experienced PMs here?
I had yes. Obviously not the majority, or at least that's not my experience from this process. But there are some, yes. And I think being Vipps it's a privilege, right? We are on 4 million Norwegians phone already, and we have a brand that people like. We have a product market fit, at least for many of our products today. So we doesn't start on scratch, like you mentioned, Hans Martin, when Oda is scaling abroad, which is a direction is something Vipps is going to do. We have international ambitions, but we haven't started yet. So we will probably struggle a bit going. When we look for people now, we get a lot of interest, right? And a lot of people want to be part of the brand. And then brand awareness of Vipps in Norway is like 99.9%. But going abroad, where you start on a totally different point, that there's a totally different point of departure, it's gonna surprise us, I believe.
Could I ask you, like to when you look at candidates, like how important for you is it that they have prior experience within, for instance, fintech or banking, or kind of in the business that you are in? Have you, like, how much does that actually weigh when you assess a candidate?
The short answer here is little. I think there's a saying like hire for attitude and train for skills, and I think that includes domain competence. So we're looking for someone with the right mindset, with the right traits and personality. We discussed cultural fit and the soft and the relational aspect. Some more, we're looking for people that knows product, or at least we have considered some junior profiles this time also, but then you need to show a lot of curiosity and a lot of and to show some ambition in the sense that I really want to learn product management, because then you made some reflection upon it.
I can say, though, from experience of coming into Vipps with very little payment background, that it makes the onboarding more difficult. So that is kind of, it's by making that choice then to hire people who don't need the domain knowledge. It also makes it takes longer to get fully operational. But that is a strategy, and I think that works very well in Vipps because you can always learn these things. But at least for me, it took me at least 6 months to get into banking as a domain and payments as a domain. So it does require more work in the longer run when you make that choice. But of course, then you have a broader set of people to recruit from.
And just to mention that the competence in Vipps is required, and we have a really strong payment environment and a strong payment team. But I also wanted to mention that I'm representing the end user experience part of Vipps, which is an extrovert area in terms of what we are making we are solving people's everyday problems, and we spend a lot of time digging into what people's lives and trying to find new problems. And then we kind of lean on the expertise in terms of when we're trying to figure out the solution. So our area is not, there are more complex domains in Vipps that do require more of the domain competence, I must say. So it varies from role to role.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty similar in Oda as well, right? Because for most of or many roles, it really doesn't matter, and I guess kind of the bulk of people on the product side in Oda have never kind of even been in retail. So I had no idea kind of what happened in an e-commerce kind of context when I started. So that's also kind of a little bit. It's also about kind of broadening the field, right? So getting actual candidates in, because if you go too narrow on that one, you'll be struggling, right? But that also means that, as you mentioned, Halina, the kind of onboarding process is interesting, right? And I usually kind of in Oda, that has been very much, so here's the role that we have, and we need to kind of have someone there. So let's just hire this person, put it in there, and then say, well, run ahead and fix it. So go ahead, and we'll see each other in half a year, kind of ish. And that's kind of been both. A strategy just kind of to cope with kind of scaling, because we don't really have like much internal skill development. Sort of, you need to learn on the job in a sense. But it's also kind of worked pretty well in the case of kind of building strong ownership, so to a given problem or a given area. So you're given this problem to own it as you will, and basically come back when we have a solution to it. So, and that I think our product people are very kind of they like to own stuff, right? And they like to kind of be end to end in their individual things. But it also kind of it makes for a bit of structured chaos as well, right? Like you have several kind of different kind of areas and processes and whatnot that kind of happens at the same time, which can be kind of a management challenge in a sense.
And what kind of profiles are you looking for then, Hans Martin? And you touched upon it, that you have different areas, of course. In your area, what kind of profiles are you looking at? And
yeah, so up until now we've been looking for quite senior candidates, because we knew that we don't really have the organizational structure to build up kind of new profiles, right? They need to come in with a certain set of skills from the get-go. So kind of junior candidates we haven't been able to kind of I don't know, absorb them into the organization at all. They had to kind of come with experience, and so far that's been the case, and I think kind of everybody that we have basically kind of several years of experience now. But that once we kind of get, like in my area alone now, we are 10 product managers, and they now that we're kind of getting to be such a big kind of group, we could also start kind of flexing with like and kind of include more junior candidates in the mix as well, because we can distribute the load of actually onboarding them and building them up in to a certain kind of experience level internally as well. So I expect that over time that we'll be moving kind of to even kind of broader field though than what we have today. But we're still very much kind of we're establishing kind of areas and establishing kind of teams and products that doesn't exist, and for that you usually are looking for people with either kind of highly or is a specialized competence within a given field, or kind of people with quite long experience in but it's kind of it also kind of depends very much on the context that the team and the role fits into. And some also we have the difference between like what we call kind of global teams that will work on kind of the global product, and then you have local teams that works on kind of the local facility, for instance, that we would have in a given city or a given market, right? So yeah, there's a bit of difference.
I'm curious how it's been working to recruit in new markets. Can you say a little bit shortly about how it's been? Have you managed to fill your positions, and what was the kind of biggest surprise for you by recruiting internationally?
I think there's so one is kind of the like you mentioned, Ninni, kind of the name recognition, right, or kind of the knowledge about our brand in the market, which people obviously don't know, even though we kind of there's lots of kind of I don't know, media coverage on whatnot about us coming to a market, but that doesn't. Yeah, it's not kind of widely known, so you have to sell. That's kind of the one side of it. And then also kind of sourcing in a market where you don't have any kind of local contacts at all is hard. So you start kind of I don't know, you start working your network on LinkedIn basically to kind of find the people that you can talk to that know someone that you can start talking to about product management in that given market. So that's also kind of been much more kind of sourcing than we're used to. Much more kind of open conversations with candidates and people that are kind of in the vicinity of product management in a given market. And then also kind of once you get to it, you or get into a process or with the candidate, you really the narrative changes a bit from like what we have achieved so far in our given market and with our current product, to much more the opportunity space in the new market that we're entering, or on a global context. So it's a bit of a you change the story you tell, and it changed a little bit of the skills you're looking for kind of in the individual people. And then it's also kind of a natural thing, like how do you, like salaries, like where do you start kind of understanding kind of what the salary is in Berlin or Helsinki, sort of when you don't kind of have a local feeling for what the market is, and how do you balance that towards what you have in Oslo, for instance, which is interesting as well.
Have you then used kind of advisors in a way? Have you reached out to other companies in a similar situation? Just curious how you go about that.
That's basically kind of part of that kind of talent networking kind of operation, right? To kind of start understanding how the individual market actually works. But I guess also kind of in a market like Berlin, for instance, which is so inherently kind of international, it is also kind of not necessarily only Berlin you're looking for people in. You're looking basically globally for people that can move into Berlin, for instance. So it takes on a very different, as a different conversation around what you're actually, or how you approach open roles in a market.
And
It's
none of
very
you have
interesting.
talked about using external recruiters, which I'm surprised about. Maybe that Vipps, neither Vipps or Oda are using agencies for this. Is that correct?
We do, but it depends on the role. Now I'm hiring PM for vendebetaling, which is it's a more extrovert, or it's a user close to the user product, or people can relate to it. So then we get a lot of applicants, a lot of interest. But some more technical PM roles, or more towards the merchant side, which is a little bit more specialized, then we've put searches out and ask for help.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically kind of the same in our context. Like highly specialized roles that is very hard to get, you would use kind of external candidates, and also kind of for some management positions, which is kind of quite hard to I don't know, build up a certain network in if you're not present. So that is also a place where we from time to time would use external agencies.
And we need to start wrapping up in a minute, but the last thing I'm curious about is the actual market now for product managers. I get the sense, at least very anecdotally, that it's a very good market for being a PM. So I get the feeling there are a lot of jobs out there, especially in Norway right now. There's a lot of interest. Do you get the same feeling? Is something changing in Oslo now? In Norway, sorry, not just Oslo.
I think yes. I've seen during my years as a PM, I see the supply of possibilities is increasing. I think I get the feeling that all companies have, it started off with it's part of the digitalization process in our society that people realized, oh, we need tech, or it used to be called IT, and then we moved on to, oh yeah, we need to build tech organizations, and then slowly they realized that the position or the role that is the glue between business and tech, that is something we need to invest in, which is basically the PM role. So I feel like the market has suddenly realized that this is something all companies are in need of. So my personal experience is that it's a big difference now, and I think we will see more of it. And I think we will see it in terms of in academic the sphere. We will see more specific professional studies, or that you can at someday we will see a product management school, I'm sure.
I think so too. So I'm going to finish off by saying I think it's an amazing time to come into product if you're interested. Me and Hans Martin we're always interested in helping people out. If you're curious about product, please contact us on LinkedIn or whatever, and Ninni as well, I think. If you need help kind of getting into to starting out, because it's such an exciting time in product, come and join us. So thank you so much, Ninni, for that insight. And Hans Martin, you've been talking more than usual. I think it's very nice.
I kind of feel it now that I've talked a lot now. Yeah.
All right.
But thanks a lot. Let's not wait another 2 months for the next one, Halina.
We promise.
Faster with the next one. Yeah.
Okay. Have a good day.